Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the HSV Phoenix and watched the stars drift past the main screen. The ship had been moving through empty space for 3 weeks now, far beyond the edge of human territory. Their mission was simple: look for new worlds that humans could live on and check for signs of other life in the galaxy. So far, they had found nothing but empty space and dead rocks floating around distant suns. Morrison was a tall man with graying hair who had spent most of his life in space. He had commanded ships for 20 years and had never seen anything that made him believe humans were not alone in the universe. The Phoenix was his third command and probably his last before retirement. At 55 years old, he was getting tired of long journeys that led nowhere. The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. Lisa Grant sat at the engineering console, watching the ship's systems with careful eyes. She was 38 years old and one of the best engineers in the human fleet. Her red hair was always tied back in a tight knot, and she rarely smiled, but Morrison knew she could fix anything that broke on the ship. Tony Blake worked at the communications station, listening for any signals from other ships or from Earth. He was young, only 26, and still believed they might find something amazing out here in the dark. Dr. Amanda Foster sat at the science station, studying data from their sensors. She was the ship's expert on life and had spent years hoping to find proof that humans were not the only thinking beings in the galaxy. At 42, she was still hopeful, but growing less sure with each empty system they explored. The fourth member of the bridge crew was Navigator Sam Peters, a quiet man who made sure they always knew where they were and how to get home. Morrison was thinking about ordering the ship to turn around and head back to Earth when Tony Blake suddenly sat up straight in his chair. The young man's face went pale, and he started pressing buttons on his console very fast. Morrison could see that something had surprised the communications officer very much. "Captain," Tony said in a voice that shook a little. "I'm getting a signal." Morrison walked over to Tony's station. In 3 weeks of travel, they had heard nothing but the background noise of space. Any signal would be interesting, but Morrison could tell from Tony's face that this was more than just interesting. "What kind of signal?" Morrison asked. "Tony's." Fingers moved over his controls as he tried to clean up the transmission. "It's encrypted, sir. Human encryption. Old style, maybe 200 years old." The bridge went very quiet. Human ships had not been this far from Earth 200 years ago. The first attempts to travel between stars had failed badly, and most of those ships had been lost. Morrison felt his heart start to beat faster. "Can you decode it?" Morrison asked. Tony worked for several minutes before shaking his head. "The encryption is too old, sir. I can tell it's human, but I can't read what it says." "Wait." He stopped and listened to his headphones. "There's something else, Captain. The signal has an identification code." Morrison waited while Tony checked his computer. When the young man looked up, his face was white as paper. "Sir, the code belongs to the JÖRMUNGANDR." Everyone on the bridge stopped what they were doing. The JÖRMUNGANDR was a name every human knew. It had been one of the first colony ships to leave Earth, carrying 10,000 people to start a new life around a distant star. The ship had vanished 200 years ago, and no one had ever learned what happened to it. Some people thought it had exploded. Others believed it had gotten lost in space. But everyone agreed that the JÖRMUNGANDR and everyone on it was dead. "That's impossible," Dr. Foster said. "The JÖRMUNGANDR disappeared 2 centuries ago." Morrison stared at the communications console. "Are you sure about the identification code?" Tony checked his computer again. "Yes, sir. It's definitely the JÖRMUNGANDR's code. But, Captain, there's more. I can make out a few words that aren't encrypted." What words? Tony listened again and then looked up at Morrison with frightened eyes. They are coming. The bridge was silent for a long moment. Morrison felt cold despite the warm air on the ship. He had been in space long enough to know that when something seemed impossible, it usually meant trouble was coming. "Can you trace where the signal is coming from?" Morrison asked. Tony worked at his console for several minutes. "Yes, sir. It's coming from a star system about 6 light-years from here. The signal is weak, like it traveled a very long way." Morrison looked at the main screen, which showed only stars and empty space. Somewhere out there, something that claimed to be the JÖRMUNGANDR was sending messages with 200-year-old codes and warning that they were coming. Morrison did not like mysteries, especially mysteries that involved lost ships and warnings about unknown enemies. Dr. Foster stood up from her station. "Captain, I think we should return to Earth immediately and report this. If the JÖRMUNGANDR somehow survived, Earth needs to know." Morrison understood her concern. The smart thing would be to go home and let other people figure out what the signal meant. But Morrison also knew that by the time they reached Earth and a proper expedition was organized, it might be too late to learn the truth. If the JÖRMUNGANDR was really out there and in trouble, every day could matter. Lisa Grant spoke up from the engineering station. "Captain, our jump drive is working perfectly. We could reach that system in 2 days." Morrison looked around the bridge at his crew. They were all looking at him, waiting for his decision. He had 4 people under his command and a ship that was not built for fighting. If they found trouble at the source of the signal, they might not be able to handle it. But Morrison was also curious. The JÖRMUNGANDR had been lost for 200 years. If it was somehow still out there, he wanted to know how and why. And those 3 words, "They are coming," suggested that something dangerous was heading toward human space. Morrison could not ignore that possibility. "Mr. Blake, can you get any more information from the signal?" Tony listened carefully to his headphones and worked at his controls. "There are some numbers, sir. They look like coordinates." "Coordinates to what?" "I think they're location coordinates, Captain. A place where we should go." Morrison made his decision. "Dr. Foster, I know you think we should go home. But if something dangerous is coming toward Earth, we need to know about it now. We're going to follow those coordinates." Dr. Foster looked worried, but nodded. "If we're going, Captain, we should be very careful. A signal from a lost ship could mean many things, and not all of them are good," Morrison agreed. "Mr. Peters, plot a course for those coordinates. Ms. Grant, make sure our jump drive is ready. Mr. Blake, keep listening for more signals. Dr. Foster, prepare your equipment to study anything we might find." The crew went to work, preparing the ship for the jump. Morrison stood on the bridge and watched the stars on the main screen. In a few hours, they would jump to a system that might hold answers to a 200-year-old mystery. The signal from the JÖRMUNGANDR could be real, or it could be something else pretending to be the lost colony ship. Either way, Morrison was about to learn something that would change everything he thought he knew about the galaxy. The Phoenix jumped into hyperspace, carrying its crew toward an unknown system and an impossible signal from the past. Morrison did not know it yet, but he was about to become the first human to make contact with a civilization that spanned thousands of worlds and had been fighting a war older than human history. The Phoenix dropped out of hyperspace, and immediately every alarm on the bridge started ringing. Morrison rushed to his command chair as the main screen filled with images that made no sense. 3 suns hung in space ahead of them, circling each other in a perfect dance. But that was not what made the alarms sound. The space around the three stars was full of ships. Morrison had never seen ships like these before. They were huge, some of them bigger than entire cities on Earth. Their shapes were wrong too, with curves and angles that human engineers would never use. Some looked like giant sea creatures made of metal, while others resembled enormous flowers with petals that glowed with their own light. Hundreds of these alien vessels moved through space in patterns that seemed almost like a dance. "Contact!" Tony Blake shouted from his station. "Multiple ships closing on our position." Morrison watched the main screen as 6 alien vessels approached the Phoenix. Each ship was at least 10 times bigger than his own, and they moved with a grace that human ships could never match. Morrison felt his mouth go dry as he realized what was happening. After 200 years of wondering if humans were alone, in the universe, the Phoenix had found the answer. They were definitely not alone. "Sir," Lisa Grant called from engineering, "they're scanning us. Our sensors show energy beams coming from all 6 ships." Morrison tried to stay calm even though his heart was beating very fast. This was first contact with alien life, something humans had dreamed about and feared for centuries. Everything he did in the next few minutes might decide whether humans and these aliens became friends or enemies. "Mr. Blake, are you getting any communications from them?" Tony worked frantically at his console. "Yes, sir, but I can't understand any of it. It's not like any language I know." "Wait, something's happening." The main screen changed, and suddenly Morrison was looking at an alien face. The creature had blue skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on its head. It had no nose that Morrison could see, but there was a mouth with too many teeth. When it spoke, the words came out in musical tones that sounded almost pretty. "Greetings, unknown vessel," the alien said, and Morrison was amazed to hear the words in perfect English. "I am Commander Zixathala of the Confederation Security Fleet. You have entered protected space without authorization. State your origin and purpose." Morrison stood up and faced the screen. This was the most important moment in human history, and he was the one who had to handle it. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel Phoenix. We come from Earth and we're following a distress signal." The alien's 4 eyes blinked in a pattern that Morrison could not read. "Human? Earth? These names are not in our records. What sector do you claim as your origin?" Morrison looked at Tony Blake, who quickly worked at his console. "We come from a system about 6 light years from here. Our star is called Sol." Commander Zixathala was quiet for a moment, and Morrison could see other aliens moving around behind, her on what must be her ship's bridge. Finally, she spoke again. "Captain Morrison, there are no inhabited systems in that region of space. Our long-range sensors show only empty void where you claim to come from." Morrison felt confused. How could their sensors not detect Earth and all the human colonies? "Commander, I assure you that human civilization exists. We have been spacefaring for over 300 years. "That is impossible," Zixathala said. "The Confederation has monitored this region of the galaxy for 10,000 years. No new species has achieved spaceflight without our knowledge. You will accompany us to the nearest security station for questioning." Morrison wanted to argue, but he could see that the 6 alien ships had moved to surround the Phoenix. He also noticed that each ship had weapons that could probably destroy his vessel with a single shot. The smart thing to do was cooperate and hope he could explain the situation once they had a chance to talk. "We will come peacefully," Morrison said, "but I request that you listen to our story. I think there has been a misunderstanding." All misunderstandings will be resolved at the security station, Zixthala replied. Follow the escort ships and do not deviate from the assigned course. The screen went dark, and Morrison found himself staring at the alien fleet. Lisa Grant spoke up from her station. Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures from those ships. Their technology is far beyond anything we have. Morrison nodded. He had already figured that out. These aliens had ships that could probably travel anywhere in the galaxy, and they had weapons that made human military vessels look like toys. If they wanted to destroy the Phoenix, there was nothing Morrison could do to stop them, but they had not attacked. They were treating the Phoenix like a lost ship that needed help, rather than an enemy that needed to be destroyed. That gave Morrison hope that humans and the Confederation could work things out once the confusion was cleared up. The Phoenix followed the alien escort ships toward one of the massive structures orbiting the three suns. As they got closer, Morrison could see that it was not just a ship, but an entire city in space. The station was bigger than anything humans had ever built, with sections that spun to create artificial gravity and docking bays that could hold hundreds of ships. Dr. Foster stared at the images on her screen with amazement. Captain, look at the biodiversity readings I'm getting from that station. There are dozens of different life forms on board. This isn't just one alien species. It's an entire civilization made up of many different races. Morrison felt a chill as he realized what that meant. The Confederation was not just one alien species that humans might be able to deal with. It was an entire galaxy-spanning civilization with thousands of years of experience and technology that made human achievements look primitive. The Phoenix was guided into a docking bay that was easily big enough to hold 20 ships their size. As soon as they were locked into position, Morrison could see alien figures moving around outside. Some walked on two legs like humans, but others crawled on many legs or floated through the air without any visible means of support. Captain, Tony Blake said nervously, I'm getting a translation request. They want permission to link our computers to their translation system. Morrison thought about it for a moment. Allowing aliens access to their computer systems was risky, but they needed to be able to communicate if they were going to solve this problem. Grant them access, but monitor everything they do. Within minutes, Tony reported that the translation link was working. Morrison could now hear alien voices speaking in dozens of different languages, all of which his computer automatically translated into English. The variety of sounds was amazing, from musical tones like Commander Zixthala's voice to harsh clicking, noises and deep rumbling sounds that seemed to come from very large creatures. Commander Zixthala's image appeared on the main screen again. Captain Morrison, you and your senior officers will come aboard our station for questioning. Bring any records that support your claims about human civilization. Morrison selected his team carefully. He would take Dr. Foster because she might be able to communicate with the aliens about biological matters, and Tony Blake because he was handling the translation systems. Lisa Grant would stay on the Phoenix to watch the ship and make sure the aliens did not try to steal their technology. As Morrison prepared to leave his ship, he thought about the JÖRMUNGANDR signal that had brought them here. Somewhere in this system, there might be survivors from the lost colony ship who could help explain how humans had remained hidden from the Confederation for so long. But first, Morrison had to convince these aliens that humans were real and that they posed no threat to galactic civilization. Morrison walked toward the airlock, knowing that the next few hours would determine whether humanity joined the galactic community as friends or was treated as a dangerous unknown that needed to be controlled. Either way, the galaxy would never be the same. Morrison walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever inside the alien station. The walls curved in ways that made his eyes hurt, and the gravity felt strange under his feet. Sometimes it was too light, and sometimes too heavy, as if the station was built for creatures who came from many different worlds with different conditions. Commander Zixathala led them through the maze of passages, her 4 eyes watching everything while she moved with a fluid grace that Morrison envied. Dr. Foster walked beside him, taking readings with a small device and looking amazed at everything she saw. Tony Blake stayed close behind them, listening to the translation device and trying to understand the dozens of conversations happening around them. They passed through sections where the air was thick and humid, and Morrison could see creatures that looked like walking trees tending to what might have been gardens. In another area, the air was thin and cold, and beings that floated on gas-filled bladders drifted through chambers filled with crystalline structures that glowed with soft light. "Your species' adaptability is unusual," Zixathala said, as she noticed, Morrison breathing normally in each different environment. "Most species require environmental suits when moving through mixed-atmosphere stations," Dr. Foster spoke up. "Humans evolved on a world with many different climates. We can adapt to a wide range of conditions." Zixathala's 4 eyes blinked in that unreadable pattern again. "Interesting. That trait is rare among galactic species. Most civilizations develop on worlds with stable, uniform environments." They finally reached a large chamber where dozens of aliens sat around a curved table. Morrison had never seen so many different types of intelligent life in one place. Some looked almost like humans except for strange skin colors or extra limbs. Others were so alien that Morrison could not even figure out which end was their head. At the center of the table sat a being that looked very old and wise. It had gray skin covered in intricate patterns and eyes that seemed to hold the weight of centuries. When it spoke, its voice was deep and musical. "I am Elder Vothron, Speaker for the Confederation Council. Captain Morrison, your arrival has created significant concern among our member species. We have records going back 50,000 years, and no species has ever appeared in our space without prior contact." Morrison stepped forward. "Elder Vothran, I understand your confusion, but I assure you that humans are real and that we come from the Sol system. We have been exploring space for over 300 years, but this is our first contact with other intelligent life." "Impossible," said a voice from across the table. Morrison turned to see a creature that looked like it was made of living rock. "Our sensors sweep every system within 1,000 light years. No civilization could develop without our knowledge." Dr. Foster opened her portable computer and showed images of Earth and the human colonies. "These are our worlds. Earth is our home planet, and we have established colonies on 17 other worlds in nearby systems." The aliens studied the images with great interest. Morrison could hear them talking in dozens of languages, all translated by the Universal communication system. Some seemed amazed by what they saw, while others appeared suspicious or confused. Elder Vothran raised a hand for silence. "These images could be fabricated. We need more proof than pictures on a computer screen." Morrison was getting frustrated. How could he prove that humans existed when the aliens claimed their sensors showed nothing where human space should be? Then Tony Blake stepped forward with an excited expression on his face. "Captain, I've been listening to their communication networks. They're talking about something called the Devourers. I think that might be connected to the signal we received from the JÖRMUNGANDR." Elder Vothran's expression changed immediately. "You know of the Devourers? How is that possible?" Morrison seized the opportunity. "We came here following a distress signal from one of our lost ships, the JÖRMUNGANDR. The signal contained a warning that they are coming. If these devourers are some kind of threat, maybe that's what the signal was warning about." The chamber erupted in excited conversation. Morrison could see that the mention of the JÖRMUNGANDR had caused quite a reaction among the aliens. Commander Zixthala leaned over to speak quietly with Elder Vothron, and Morrison caught fragments of their conversation through the translation system. Finally, Elder Vothron spoke again. "Captain Morrison, the name JÖRMUNGANDR is in our historical records. 200 years ago, a primitive vessel crashed on the rim world of Kepler's Rest. The survivors spoke of a great journey from a distant star and warned of dark entities they had encountered in deep space." Morrison felt his heart jump. "The JÖRMUNGANDR survived? There were survivors?" "Yes," Elder Vothron said. "They lived full lives among the colonists of Kepler's Rest. Their descendants still live there today. But, Captain, they spoke of the same threat you mentioned. They called them the Devourers, ancient machines that consume entire star systems." Dr. Foster looked up from her computer. "That would explain why your sensors can't detect our colonies. If these Devourers are moving toward human space, they might be blocking or interfering with long-range scans." Commander Zixthala nodded grimly. "The Devourers have been pushing deeper into Confederation space for the past century. We have lost 17 systems to their advance. They consume everything: planets, asteroids, even stars themselves, leaving nothing but empty void behind." Morrison felt cold as he realized what this meant. If the Devourers were moving toward human space, Earth and all the colonies could be in terrible danger. And if they left nothing but void behind, that would explain why the Confederation's sensors showed empty space where human civilization should be. Elder Vothron stood up from his chair. "Captain Morrison, if you truly represent an unknown human civilization, and if that civilization lies in the path of the Devourer advance, then we must act quickly. The Council will need to review this information and decide how to proceed." A new voice spoke from across the table. Morrison turned to see a being that looked like a giant insect with multiple arms. "Elder Vothran, if these humans are real, they represent a completely unknown factor. How do we know they are not connected to the Devourers somehow?" Morrison felt anger rise in his chest, but Dr. Foster touched his arm to calm him. She stepped forward to address the insect-like being. "We understand your caution. But if we were connected to the Devourers, why would we come here to warn you about them? We're as much at risk as you are." Commander Zixthala spoke up. "The human ship's technology is primitive, but functional. Their weapons are projectile-based rather than energy-based, and their propulsion system is crude but effective. Nothing about their vessel suggests Devourer technology." Elder Vothron was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Finally, he spoke. "Captain Morrison, we will arrange for you to visit Kepler's Rest and examine the records left by the JÖRMUNGANDR survivors. If your story is confirmed, the Confederation will need to consider how to protect your people from the Devourer advance." Morrison felt relieved. Finally, he was getting somewhere. "Thank you, Elder Vothron. How long will it take to reach Kepler's Rest?" 3 days by our fastest ships," Zixthala replied. "But, Captain, you should know that the situation is more urgent than you realize. Our deep space monitors have detected increased Devourer activity near the edge of their current territory. If they are indeed moving toward your space, you may have very little time to prepare." Morrison thought about the Phoenix's communication systems. Can we contact Earth from here to warn them? Tony Blake checked his equipment. The distance is too great for our normal communications, Captain. We would need to use the Confederation's relay network. Elder Vothron nodded. We will. Allow you to send a warning message to your people. But first, we must confirm your identity at Kepler's Rest. If the JÖRMUNGANDR survivors' records support your claims, the Confederation will offer whatever assistance we can provide. Morrison felt hope for the first time since they had arrived in alien space. The Confederation might be willing to help defend humanity against the Devourers, but he also realized that time was running out. If the ancient enemy was already moving toward human space, every day of delay could mean the destruction of entire worlds. As the council session ended, Morrison found himself thinking about the brave crew of the JÖRMUNGANDR who had crashed on an alien world 200 years ago. They had tried to warn someone about the Devourers, and now their message had finally reached human ears. Morrison only hoped it was not too late to make a difference. The journey to Kepler's Rest took 3 days aboard a Confederation vessel that made the Phoenix look like a child's toy. Morrison stood on the observation deck and watched star systems pass by in the blink of an eye as the alien ship moved through. Hyperspace lanes that had been established thousands of years before humans learned to make fire. Dr. Foster spent most of the journey talking with Confederation scientists about human biology and adaptation. Morrison could hear her excitement. Through the translation system, as she shared data about how humans could survive in environments that would kill most other species within minutes, the alien scientists seemed amazed by human genetic flexibility. Tony Blake worked with the ship's communication officers to send a quantum message back to Earth. The message was simple but urgent. Humans were not alone in the galaxy, and a terrible enemy was moving toward Earth space. Every human world needed to prepare for war against an enemy that consumed entire star systems. Morrison found himself talking with Commander Zix Thala about military matters. The more he learned about the Devourers, the more worried he became. These were not just aggressive aliens who wanted to conquer territory. They were something much worse. Ancient machines that had been consuming matter for millions of years and turning it into more machines. How do you fight something like that? Morrison asked as they studied tactical displays showing Devourer movements over the past century. Zixathala's 4 eyes showed an expression that Morrison was learning to recognize as sadness. We do not fight them, Captain Morrison. We run from them. When they appear in a system, we evacuate as many people as we can and abandon the rest. It is the only way any of us have survived. Morrison stared at the tactical display. You've been retreating for 100 years? Much longer than that, Zixthala replied. The Confederation once controlled twice as much territory as it does now. We have been slowly falling back toward the galactic core for over 1,000 years. Morrison felt sick as he realized what this meant. The most advanced civilization in the galaxy, with technology that seemed like magic to human eyes, had been losing a war for 1,000 years. What chance did humanity have against such an enemy? When they finally reached Kepler's Rest, Morrison got his first look at a Confederation colony world. The planet was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents, but what amazed him most were the cities. They seemed to grow from the landscape like living things, with buildings that curved and flowed in harmony with the natural environment. The Phoenix crew was taken to a museum dedicated to the JÖRMUNGANDR survivors. Morrison stood before a memorial wall covered with names and felt a deep connection to these humans who had died so far from home. But they had not died in vain. Their warnings about the devourers had been preserved, waiting for the day when other humans would come to find them. Doctor. Foster examined genetic samples taken from the JÖRMUNGANDR descendants and confirmed that they were definitely human. More importantly, she found records that the survivors had kept, written in old Earth languages and hidden in the memorial's foundation. The records described the survivors' encounter with machines that ate entire worlds and left nothing behind. Tony. Blake discovered something even more disturbing. The records included star charts showing where the JÖRMUNGANDR had encountered the devourers 200 years ago. When he compared those locations with current devourer positions, it became clear that the machines were moving in a straight line toward the Sol system. Captain, Tony said quietly, based on their rate of advance, the devourers will reach human space within 2 years. Morrison felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Earth and 17 colony worlds containing billions of human beings had less than 2 years to prepare for an enemy that the most advanced civilization in the galaxy could not defeat. When they returned to the Confederation capital, Morrison found himself in the middle of the biggest political crisis in galactic history. The discovery of humanity had split the Confederation Council into different factions. Some species wanted to evacuate human space and bring all humans to safety deeper in Confederation territory. Others argued that humanity should be left to fight the devourers alone, since getting involved would only draw devourer attention to Confederation worlds. But there was a third faction that interested Morrison the most. Led by a species called the Keth Mori, these aliens believed that humanity might be the key to finally stopping the devourer advance. The Keth Mori were warriors who had been frustrated by the Confederation's policy of retreat and evacuation. General Thrak Zahn of the Keth Mori military requested a private meeting with Morrison. The alien was tall and muscular, with skin like armor and eyes that burned with fierce intelligence. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had fought many battles. Captain Morrison, Thrak Zahn said, my people have studied your ship's combat systems and your crew's behavioral patterns. You approach warfare differently than any species in the Confederation. Morrison was not sure if that was good or bad. How so, General? When faced with a threat, your first instinct is to attack rather than retreat. Your tactics are unpredictable and chaotic compared to our systematic approaches. Most importantly, your people seem to thrive in situations that would break the spirits of other species. Morrison thought about human military history. Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We've learned to adapt quickly when our lives are in danger. Thrak Zahn leaned forward with interest. Exactly. The Confederation has grown comfortable with its technological superiority. We have fought the devourers the same way for 1,000 years with predictable results. But humans fight like cornered animals, and cornered animals can be very dangerous. Morrison began to understand what the Keth Mori general was suggesting. You think humans might be able to fight the devourers in ways that Confederation forces cannot? I think humans might be crazy enough to try things that we would consider suicide, Thrak Zahn replied. And sometimes crazy tactics are exactly what you need when facing an impossible enemy. Dr. Foster joined their conversation with exciting news. Her biological studies had revealed something that Confederation scientists had missed for thousands of years. Human genetic adaptability was not just unusual, it was unique in the galaxy. Every other species had evolved to fit specific environmental conditions, but humans could modify their behavior and biology to survive almost anywhere. General Thrack Zone, Dr. Foster explained. Humans can function in environments that would kill Confederation soldiers. More importantly, we can adapt our tactics and strategies much faster than species with more rigid behavioral patterns. Morrison felt a spark of hope for the first time since learning about the Devourers. If humans really were more adaptable than other galactic species, maybe they could find ways to fight that the Confederation had never considered. The breakthrough came when Lisa Grant was allowed to examine Confederation military technology. The human engineer spent 2 days studying their most advanced weapons and defensive systems, and then she made a request that shocked the alien scientists. "Your technology is amazing," Grant told them, "but it's too complicated. You've spent so much time making everything perfect that you've forgotten how to make things that work when everything goes wrong." Grant showed them human equipment that was crude by Confederation standards, but incredibly robust. Human weapons might be less powerful than alien energy beams, but they would keep working even after taking damage that would disable more sophisticated systems. Morrison realized that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their tactics. It was their ability to keep fighting when any reasonable person would give up. The Confederation had been retreating from the Devourers for 1,000 years because they were reasonable people who understood when they were outmatched, but humans had never been entirely reasonable. When faced with impossible odds, they had a tendency to do impossible things. Morrison began to think that maybe, just maybe, humanity could give the galaxy something it had not had in a very long time. Hope that the Devourers could be stopped. Admiral Chen Wei received Morrison's message while standing in the war room of Earth Defense Command. The quantum transmission had taken 3 weeks to reach Earth through the Confederation's communication network, and by the time it arrived, every human world was already mobilizing for a war they barely understood. The message was simple, but terrifying. Humanity was not alone in the galaxy, and an ancient enemy that consumed entire star systems was heading directly toward Earth. The enemy would arrive in less than 2 years, and the most advanced civilization in the galaxy had been retreating. From this threat for over 1,000 years, Chen Wei was 62 years old and had spent her entire career preparing for wars that never came. She had always assumed that when humanity finally met alien life, it would be a gradual process of exploration and diplomacy. She had never imagined that first contact would come with a warning that humanity had 18 months to prepare for extinction. Within hours of receiving Morrison's message, every shipyard in human space was working around the clock to build new vessels. The human fleet was small compared to what Morrison described of Confederation forces, but Chen Wei was determined to make every ship count. If the Devourers expected humans to run away like everyone else, they were about to learn that humans did not always do what was expected. Back in Confederation space, Morrison found himself appointed as humanity's official representative to the galactic government. It was not a job he had wanted, but he was the only human who understood both sides of the situation. The Confederation needed to understand how humans thought, and humans needed to understand what they were facing. The political situation was getting worse every day. Reports from the galactic rim showed that the Devourers were advancing faster than ever before. 3 more star systems had been consumed in the past month, and refugee ships were streaming toward the galactic core carrying survivors who had lost everything. Morrison stood before the Confederation Council and made a proposal that shocked every alien in the chamber. Instead of evacuating human space, he suggested that the Confederation should make a stand at the edge of human territory. If they were going to fight the Devourers eventually, It made sense to fight them as far from the galactic core as possible. Elder Vothran spoke for many of the council members when he said, "Captain Morrison, what you suggest is suicide. The Devourers have never been stopped. Every species that has tried to fight them has been destroyed." Morrison looked around the chamber at representatives of dozens of alien species. "With respect, Elder Vothran, maybe that's because nobody has ever really tried to fight them. You've been retreating for 1,000 years, but retreat is not victory. Eventually, you run out of places to run to." General Thraxon of the Keth Mori stood up to support Morrison's proposal. "The human speaks truth. We have been so focused on preserving what we have that we have forgotten how to fight for what we believe in. Perhaps it is time to remember." The IA debate went on for days, but finally the council reached a decision. They would send a joint fleet to human space to make a stand against the Devourers. It would be the largest military force the Confederation had assembled in centuries, and it would be commanded jointly by human and alien officers. Morrison returned to the Phoenix to find that his ship had been upgraded with the best technology the Confederation could provide. Lisa Grant had worked with alien engineers to create hybrid systems that combined human durability with alien sophistication. The result was a vessel that looked like the old Phoenix, but could fight alongside the most advanced ships in the galaxy. Dr. Foster had made her own contributions to the war effort. Her studies of human adaptability had led to new training programs that taught Confederation soldiers how to think more flexibly in combat. It was not easy for species that had evolved rigid behavioral patterns, but some of the younger aliens were learning to improvise the way humans did naturally. Tony Blake had become the Chief Communications Officer for the Joint Fleet, coordinating between human and alien forces using translation systems that he had helped design. His biggest challenge was not technical, but cultural. Teaching humans and aliens to work together when their ways of thinking were so different. The Joint Fleet assembled at the edge of human space, and Morrison got his first look at the full scope of Confederation military power. There were over 3,000 ships ranging from small scouts to massive battleships that could destroy planets. The human contribution was smaller but significant. 200 ships crewed by people who had spent their entire lives preparing for impossible fights. Admiral Chen Wei commanded the human forces from her flagship, the HSV Defiance. She was a small woman with gray hair and steel in her eyes, and Morrison could tell that the alien officers respected her even though they did not always understand her decisions. The enemy arrived exactly when the long-range sensors predicted they would. Morrison stood on the Phoenix's bridge and watched in horror as the Devourer fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. The enemy ships were unlike anything in Morrison's nightmares. They were huge and organic-looking, as if someone had taken living creatures and turned them into machines of war. At the center of the fleet was something that defied description. It was bigger than a moon and shaped like no ship Morrison had ever seen. The surface crawled with mechanical tentacles and the whole thing pulsed with malevolent energy. Morrison realized he was looking at the original Devourer vessel, the machine that had started the cycle of consumption millions of years ago. The battle began badly for the defenders. Confederation tactics that had worked against conventional enemies proved useless against the Devourers. The enemy ships regenerated damage faster than the Allied fleet could inflict it, and their weapons seemed to drain energy from anything they touched. But when the human ships engaged, something unexpected happened. Instead of following careful battle plans, human captains started making decisions that alien commanders thought were insane. Captain Danny Price of the HSV Courage rammed his ship directly into a Devourer vessel, something that violated every rule of space combat. But it worked, and the enemy ship was destroyed in the collision. Admiral Chen Wei watched the battle from her command center and realized that human unpredictability was having an effect on the enemy. The Devourers had been programmed to expect certain responses from their opponents, but humans were not responding the way they were supposed to. Morrison found himself leading a desperate attack on the original Devourer vessel. The Phoenix had been equipped with the best shields and weapons the Confederation could provide, but Morrison knew it would not be enough. The enemy ship was too big and too well defended for any conventional assault to succeed. But Morrison was not planning a conventional assault. He ordered Lisa Grant to prepare the ship's reactor for overload, while Dr. Foster worked on a biological weapon she had developed specifically for the Devourers. If they could not destroy the original vessel with weapons, maybe they could poison it from the inside. The Phoenix punched through the enemy's defenses using tactics that made no sense to alien observers. Morrison ordered random course changes and unpredictable attacks that confused the Devourer targeting systems. When the ship finally reached the surface of the giant vessel, Morrison did something that no Confederation captain would have considered. He ordered his crew to abandon ship while he piloted the Phoenix into the enemy's core. But Dr. Foster had a better idea. Instead of destroying the original vessel, she had found a way to reprogram it. The Devourers were not truly alive, but they followed behavioral patterns that had been established millions of years ago. If those patterns could be changed, the entire Devourer fleet could be turned against itself. Morrison found himself deep inside the alien vessel, fighting through corridors filled with mechanical horrors while carrying Dr. Foster's reprogramming device. The ship around him was alive in ways that made his skin crawl, but he kept moving toward the central core where the original Devourer intelligence resided. When Morrison finally reached the heart of the ancient vessel, he found something that amazed him. The original Devourers had not been machines at all. They had been living beings like humans, but they had been so afraid of extinction that they had turned themselves into machines designed to consume everything in their path. Their fear had become a program that had been running for millions of years. Morrison activated Dr. Foster's device and watched as new programming spread through the Devourer network. Instead of consuming everything they encountered, the machines began to restore what they had destroyed. Across the galaxy, dead systems started to come back to life as the Devourers reversed millions of years of destruction. The war ended not with a great battle, but with a moment of understanding. The Devourers had been trapped in a cycle of fear and destruction, but humanity had given them something they had lost long ago: the ability to choose a different path. 6 months later, Morrison stood on the observation deck of a space station, orbiting Earth, and watched as human and alien ships worked together to rebuild the systems that had been damaged in the war.